Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Are the Bible and other ancient scriptures full of UFO stories? Are the same forces active today? What does it all mean for our understanding of God?
Hello, and welcome to the 949th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you on our 14th anniversary show. Wow, 14 years really went flying by, huh?
Time flies and having fun.
Yes, and no shortage of topics. Coming to you from WON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, on YouTube and via TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and those surprising questions came from my co-host, partner in Paranormal Adventures, and dad, Paul. And today we welcome a new and very special friend to his debut on the show.
You've seen and heard him on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, The Real 4400, The Abduction Diaries, many more shows. And we're honored to have him as we begin our 15th year on the air. A native of Baltimore, Maryland, Reverend Michael J.S. Carter worked for many years as an actor in New York City before deciding to enter the ministry. He earned his Master of Divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City in 2000. He has been a hospital chaplain, has served Unitarian Universalist congregations, and most recently moved to North Carolina to continue his ministry there. Michael is a longtime UFO contactee and the author of 4 books that I know of, including the Amazon bestseller Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible, the subject of our discussion today.
So, Reverend Michael Carter, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and here we are, and I hope it's the beginning of a long relationship.
Indeed. I have to say on a personal note that I'm very, very choosy about who I call a friend, but Michael and I have never developed such high regard for someone so quickly. And I'm very proud to call him a friend. I think
that's both ways, brother. That is both ways. I know a zillion people, but only a few friends, and I count you among them.
Well, thank you so much. So, shall we pull the surprise there, Ben?
Sure, why not? So with us we have Matt Moniz.
How we doing, my old friend? I haven't seen you in a couple of decades, at least. I remember doing lectures with you and Budd Hopkins.
Wow.
Flashback?
Oh, yes! Look at you, man!
Well, Michael is you too, but Matt is a friend of the show, and we've known him for many years, doesn't live too far away, so he heard you were going to be on, and we figured we'd give you a little surprise.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful.
Okay.
Good to see you again, my friend.
You too, brother.
Matt will be, jumping in with a few questions of his own here.
No question.
So,
it's fond memories.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fond memories.
So you want to start us off there, Ben?
Sure thing. So I guess we'll kind of start, with the surprise, which we did. So I guess we'll just hop right into it. So your book Alien Scriptures, with your own contact story and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, and I didn't put all of them in there. That was the kicker for me, the first one. Let me just set the table. I was raised in African American Baptist tradition. So all this stuff that we're talking about now was a no-no. I don't even know if it even came up. But if it did, it would have been something that I didn't understand and probably would have been labeled demonic. This is not a knock. This is just what we as human beings do, especially in more traditional religion. And so I remember growing up in Baltimore, and someone asked me, I was in downtown Baltimore, and I don't know how we got to that subject, and someone asked me if I believed in UFOs, and I said no. And they said, why not? And I said, because it wasn't in the Bible. What a difference 20, 30 years makes. And so I went to the truncated version is this. I was at that time wrestling with the historical Jesus. The Baptist tradition wasn't setting well with me. I was starting to read existentialists like Sartre, and I was branching out. And this stuff is frowned upon in traditional religion. And so we went to, my girlfriend at the time and I went to Mexico, and we had a day where we went to see the pyramids in Chichen Itza and Tulum. If you've ever been, then you know it's just fascinating. I was living in New York. Going back home, I wanted to show off my tan, and I'd been away, and we got to JFK. She said, look, I'm exhausted. I'm going to go home and unpack. I caught the subway to this get-together in Hell's Kitchen. And, no adult beverages were served, tons of deviled eggs, which I love.
Classic.
And God forgive me, I love them so much. And so, we oohed and ahed, and we talked about what we saw, and I left. And I went home. I was living at the Excelsior Hotel, still there, 45 West 81st Street, between Columbus and the Park, residential hotel, across the street from the planetarium. And even to this day, I don't know whether I had to get up to go to the bathroom, or maybe I sensed something in the room, but I usually sleep on my stomach. I got up and I turned around, and at the foot of my bed, there was an individual no more than 4 feet tall, wasn't exactly gray, had the phenotype of the gray that we, looking back, kind of chalk white, almost like the person behind me, but not quite, and on the picture. And, I've had a gun pulled on me. I've had a police officer put a gun up to my head. I have never been so afraid as when I saw this little person at the end of my bed. And my girlfriend at the time, later became my first wife, she either could not or would not wake up. So it was just me and this person. And they had like a blue light around them, like an aura, and around that was a white light. It was like I was in Times Square. Remember, this is on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's not in upstate New York, some rural place. And so I felt like my heart was going to come out of my chest, and I looked at him or her, it, she, he, it looked at me, and I pulled the covers up over my head, and I remember getting to the fetal position. I was terrified. I later found out this said more about me than them, but still. And I heard this whoosh, whoosh, like this whirlwind sound, and then I felt the temperature change, and this was December 28, 1989. It was freezing. That was another reason I wanted to go to the party, because I'd just come from it was 85 degrees and I could gloat. And I was just frightened. I pulled, when the wind stopped, whatever that sound was, I pulled the covers off my head. No one was there. And groggily, Sandy woke up. What was interesting about this, just very quickly, guys, is when I wrote my latest book, Initiation, right here, shameless promotion, but here, the transformation, the spiritual transformation of the experiencer, I sent her a copy of the book, and she said, you know what, it came back to me like the first night. She said, I remember seeing these small shadowy beings in the room, but in my mind something said, go to sleep, don't worry about it, just go to sleep. Which was interesting because she had never told me that story before until after she read the book. So after that, guys, and then I'm going to shut up and you can jump in, I started having these visits every full and new moon, so twice a month. I would get a visit, and I would be paralyzed. Nothing was really said, just pictures in my mind were shown me. And so that began my journey. Since then, other races, obviously, Budd regressed me. Dr. Gene Mundy regressed me initially. And when I knew about Budd, but I met Budd at a conference in Long Island, and he offered to regress me, and then we just built up a friendship. We didn't all, at that time, we didn't see the phenomenon the same way, because I did think it was transformative. He was a little more skeptical at the time. But we don't agree on everything. But it was just transforming. Meeting Budd and Carol, but also his wife at the time, but also going through it. I'm not like my brother Stephen Greer. I don't say that all of them come here to sing Kumbaya and hold our hands. I don't know if that's true. But I know that my experiences transformed me, I think, for the better.
Now, Budd Hopkins we're referring to is probably the leading abduction researcher of the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yep.
And now Matt worked with him also.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Do you look like you want to say something?
I remember Budd being the only person that you could really approach back then with this type of subject that was at least willing to talk to you.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of my regressions as well. And when I met Mike the first time, I remember him talking about his experiences and how he said it opened him up. I'm paraphrasing you, Mike. I hope you don't mind.
No, it did. It scared me now.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I was afraid.
Yeah. So, and one of the things about being with Budd, and I'm sure Mike would agree, you got to meet all of these other people going through these same experiences.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we became, self-healing with each other, because I could relate to Michael things that happened to me, and him back to, just like when he was talking about pulling the covers over the head to hide. I wound up doing the same thing when I was a child. It was one of these things where you could, relate to these people, and you could tell yourself that I'm not crazy because they see it too, and they went through it too.
Right.
And that was crucial, that I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
It really was, because I was having a hard time for a while, for a good little while. Not sleeping, noticing physiological changes. My hair would grow really fast. I mean, now it's in a ponytail. I didn't have dreadlocks then, but skin and nails, a really heightened sense of intuition. But I was always hypervigilant. So, I wasn't sleeping. I got by on less sleep, and then I started I became a Reiki practitioner, so I was always playing with energies and stuff. But it was tough. And look, only maybe, I can't even say completely. And Michael, you may be able to relate to this, but I still go to sleep. I still leave the light on until the last minute. I don't do it every night, and I know the light on is not going to stop them from coming, and I know it may sound contradictory, because it did open me up. I wouldn't trade the experience, but for me it was the suddenness of which they could appear, and to turn over in my bed and bam, bam, they're there. It's like post-traumatic stress. I'm glad. I feel like I have a relationship with some of them, but it is scary for me now more that I could be looking over here at night or nodding out here, and I could turn around, and just the suddenness of how they can appear, it still kind of, makes me a little vigilant.
Well, let's back up a few thousand years and get into some of the ancient documents. Now, Michael, when did you you believe that the Bible and other ancient documents, ancient scriptures, are essentially a collection of UFO narratives, among other things?
Yeah. Hold on real quick. I didn't want to be rude. I thought Mike was going to say something.
Oh, he was, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, you're talking about shutting the lights off I've noticed, and I've talked to dozens of other abductees that have the same type of PTSD. They all keep a weapon of some form near them in their bed, whether it be an actual firearm, a baseball bat, a golf club, something that they identify as a weapon somewhere near them. They usually keep shades and whatever closed, doors continuously locked. You're constantly going around checking and making sure the room's secure, even though you know it's not going to stop them, but it's still something in your mind that you do just to make yourself feel...
It's like security theater.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
So, Paul, getting back to that, and thank you for that, Mike. I knew you had something to say. And I want to be clear for those who are going to be listening. I think that these sacred scriptures, whether it's the Dhammapada or, the Upanishads or the Bible, there's profound wisdom. And you start to see the evolution of how some of these religions came about and how advanced some of them were. Speaking specifically of Hinduism and what have you as far as metaphysics goes. I'm not saying that the Bible is only that there's nothing you can glean from it, but I'm convinced that these stories are what our ancestors were trying to relate in the vernacular, the nomenclature of their day, of what they were seeing, and how they tried to explain the technology. And if these star people, I'm not saying that they deliberately or intentionally, I think maybe Yahweh may have had some power issues and some anger issues, but with this technology, they were gods. They were godlike. And so I think that these stories of angels, I would say that if you put star person everywhere in the Bible that you see angel, I think it makes more sense. I do want to note that nowhere in the Bible does it say these beings had wings. For people who've seen angels and what have you, not saying there's no such thing as angels. Please hear me. I'm just saying in the Bible, because they were messengers. I forget the Hebrew word, malek or whatever for angels.
Malek.
Malek. Yeah, they were messengers, and so I think it starts to make more sense. Jesus coming and going on clouds, Elijah, Ezekiel. So I'm not taking away from the wisdom and the profoundness and the beauty of some of the writings, but I do think that this is what we are witnessing when we read these texts.
One of the, I want to let Ben get in here too, but I was, when I read your book, I was not surprised really to see that you would come to the same conclusions as in the first chapter of our 2016 book, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know is Wrong, about the arguments based around the weirdest word in any Semitic language to me, and that's Elohim.
Elohim, yes.
The first word used for God in the Bible. And you and I both studied Hebrew.
Yes.
And it's based on a feminine root with a masculine plural ending.
Yes.
So can you say something about that? I mean, it's really bizarre.
Well, for me, it was just that it's rare. I think that no matter how you cut it, it's saying, like if you look at Genesis 6, it's saying, let us make man in our image. And so it's plural. And so what it does, now some scholars have argued that God is sitting around with other angels. It's a perspective. But it's not saying that. It's saying these gods, plural, meaning more than one. Let us. So you naturally start to question, who else is doing this? who else is in the game here in this creation story? And then, of course, when you go into, Genesis 6 is kind of, it's continued in Enoch. And
obviously an ancestor of ours.
Yes. And, in the book of Jubilees and what have you, I could see why the church is threatened by it, because it challenges the Trinitarian perspective, but it also challenges, to a degree, one God. But if it's not anathema to think of this with a small g, God's plural, because even some texts, there's literature where some star people acknowledge the Palladians and Billy Meyer, and they call it creation. In Native American lore, it's called the creator. It's not an anthropomorphic being. And I think that's where it can be threatening to traditional Western religion, and also where all this confusion can come in. But let us make man in our image. So we're made in the image of the gods, plural. Obviously, there's more than one race visiting humankind at the time, because every civilization has a story of beings coming from the sky, some causing upheaval and very mischievous, and some of them bringing a more enlightened way for humans to live on the planet and with one another. This is all not happenstance, at least to my mind. So you have to reread the scriptures with this as a possibility. You don't have to agree, but looking at this as a possibility, it makes more sense, especially in lieu of what's happening today. Our government is not being as transparent as it could be. I get it, but this is big. This whole thing, UAPs, arose by any other name to my mind. And what they're saying is there's something going on out there that we can't explain. I think experiencers can explain it, but they're not going to come to us. It's not scientific enough as yet, or what have you. But because if these beings were that first visit I had that I remember when I actually saw them was December 28, 1989. I've had visits since then. They continue. Mm-hmm. So if they were visiting me in 1989 CE, they were probably visiting other people in 1989 BCE and before.
Now, Ben, did you want to jump in here?
Yes, but I have a very long-winded observation. It would probably do us...
We'll wait till after the break.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we both went to a seminary, Michael, and not the same one at the same time, but all in New York State, two of mine. And the whole notion of let us create, it was always that's a prefiguring of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Yes. And, I get it.
It's a perspective.
Yeah, and but it seemed to be more than that. I was a real pain in the neck questioner. So anyway, why don't we take our mid-show break a little bit early, and then we'll get to Ben's questions. And we've got some questions from our good friend Peter in South America. And you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with our great guest, Reverend Michael Carter, in just a moment.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to The Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal on WOON Radio. And we are going to rejoin our guest, Reverend Michael Carter. We have a very, very special guest to surprise him, and that's Matt Moniz, our good friend. And why don't we, before we get to your question, can we get to one of Peter's here?
Sure.
Okay, here you go. Peter,
Alrighty.
Our good friend in Bogota,
Yes, Peter writes to us. Is it correct that Budd Hopkins did hypnotic regression on you, which you said he did?
Pretty much
so you did answer that. But what was discovered?
Is that for Matt or for me?
For you.
Well, Matt's the bonus guy, so.
Okay. What was discovered was that I was taken aboard in a craft. It was a room that didn't have, what do you call it? It was just round, and there was a light. I don't know where it was light. I didn't see any lights. I don't know. There was a source of light, but I couldn't see where it came from. It was like a seamless room that I was examined. It kind of affirmed what Gene Mundy had done, that I wasn't crazy, because I still needed that. And that's pretty much it. You know, I don't remember anything specific, or nothing specific came up. They were gray people, or what we would call grays. I was around a table, it was chilly, and, you know, poked and prodded and looked, they looked at me, which kind of calmed me down. And Budd was excellent at what he did. That I can tell you. And maybe Matt can attest to that as well.
Yeah, Matt, he regressed you as well?
Yes, he did on several occasions, and I have to agree, his technique was awesome. It helped because he was a caring person, and he definitely had very good technique. He was trained by good people.
Okay. He never regressed us.
No leading. I don't remember any kind of leading things, leading questions. And I felt relaxed, and I would just, and this was new for me because I did not, just very quickly, I did not recall leaving my room when I was balled up in the fetal position. I had no recollection of that. Budd, it came out with Budd.
Okay. Ben, you want to jump in?
Sure. I'm gonna steer the conversation a little bit in reverse. We've been doing that the whole time. Forward, reverse, forward, reverse, forward, reverse. So now we're reversing once again. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with a guy named Richard Rollin. He's a philologist, and he has this really interesting theory which is called universal history. That essentially all history, all historical stories are all sort of different perspectives of the same events throughout every culture, and it's like you can look and you can draw parallels between all of them, and there's sort of these same threads and themes and patterns that are in every single society, throughout history. Doesn't matter if you take like ancient China, the Incas or Egypt, you shove them all together. Sure, they have different stories, different characters, but the same themes, the same plots, the same sort of entities, all are kind of the same. Now, I bring this up because there's sort of a few. We all are at a disadvantage. We're all at a major disadvantage because we all live in the year 2022, and there has been an active war. That's a strong word. There's been an active effort to change how we view reality, and it's really been going on since the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment did some good things, I will admit that, but it also did some terrible things, because we now view reality in a way that we want to bring everything to our level. We want to take everything so that we can just flatten it and say, all right, we can categorize it, we can move it, we can shift it, we can put it in these holes, we know what it is, we can control it. And essentially, the message of one Enoch, you can glean a lot of interesting stuff from it. Which, fun fact, I think the West kind of is missing out on a lot of things of how they view Apocrypha. Because in the West, Apocrypha is essentially anything that's not canon or deuterocanonical or whatever. Anything that's not in the approved text is wrong. Which doesn't really make any sense, because around the time of the Torah and Second Temple Judaism, there are plenty of other books around at the same time. They didn't just have one book. They had a bunch of other books that were all interpretations, and great example is like Philo of Alexandria, right? Philo of Alexandria has some really, I mean, he's a Platonist, but he has some really interesting views on Yahweh and all that stuff. If you ever read anything by him, it is really fascinating, especially since I think he was writing for Romans, basically trying to explain Judaism to Romans.
Yeah.
That was kind of his whole shtick. But you glean a lot of really interesting things in how they viewed the world. One really interesting thing in how they viewed it, and pretty much everybody in the ancient world, was they viewed reality as just sort of one thing. There was no separation of layers. There was no, like, okay, well, you read a history book now. You read about Julius Caesar, right? You look at Julius Caesar and you're like, okay, well, he killed 6 million Gauls and he enslaved 6 million more. Great, cool, but that's a political thing. That's all that is. It's politics, right? But it had a spiritual effect to it. It was a mythical effect. He wasn't viewed as a god because, he was a great statesman. He was viewed as a god because he exercised control over the world. And his impact was a spiritual impact as well as a mundane political impact. And it's viewed as like, one sort of thing, right? It's like Hammurabi is a great example too, which coincidentally he is mentioned in Genesis, although brief, not him specifically, but I believe he was
first known code of laws.
Right, yeah, the code of Hammurabi, right? Everyone knows the code. He's the code guy. That's his shtick, right? You do one bad thing, you get your hand cut off, whatever. And his whole thing was eye for an eye, and that was basically it.
Well, he said it was based on the laws of the Anunnaki or the people of the Most High,
right,
from the previous age.
You're skipping ahead. Skipping ahead, Dad.
All right, sorry.
So now we're getting to the point where nobody was a monotheist, right? There's this term that was invented in the 18th century by our fun German friends, or our 19th century German friends, which, okay, well, yeah, they were, monotheists. That's it. That's all they were, and they didn't believe in any other gods, which is not true, right? They believed in plenty of gods, plenty of them, all over the place, and they just were like, well, they're dumb. That basically was it. The words translated are demon, which isn't the right word. There were other translations for it, which were like, well, they're useless, basically, right? Your gods are useless, your gods are trash. Basically, it was like trash talk in some places. Because the whole thing was, I'm getting to the point here. I'm kind of rambling, but we're getting to the point. The point is, we are dealing with a reality, and we in the 21st century are viewing all of these stories, and we're like, all right, we're looking at these stories. We see class conflict. We see all these separate events, and we see all of these different things. But yet we're like, all right, well, we don't have anything to attach to it. I mean, what do we have? Our cosmology now is nothing, right? We've taken everything from the past and just thrown it out. And we've seen that in every area of our lives. Academia, we've seen it in culture and media. We've seen it in everything. The traditional stories are gone. So what do we have left? We have the paranormal, the supernatural. We have really all of these things that have been given to us for the last 100 years via ufology and spiritualism and all of these other things, because we don't have the pieces of the puzzle anymore that we had, a couple centuries, 1,000 years ago. What we have now is, well, we have aliens. We don't have gods anymore. Gods are dumb. They don't exist. Who cares? Aliens, though, we can prove that they exist because there's so many other worlds out there. They must be one of them, right? We can't prove that we can't prove there's an afterlife, but we do know that we picked up a voice on an EVP. We know that. We're in this crisis of confirmation. We're in this crisis of confirming our reality because we've thrown out everything to the point we have nothing. And we have all of these terms that we've sort of invented over the last 100 years, and we're like, all right, everything else is gone, but we have this, and we haven't thrown that out yet. But I think we're getting to a point where we're running into a wall, and all these things that we've sort of hodgepodge together over the last 100-ish years are not really doing it anymore. So what are your thoughts, Reverend?
Wow. I think and I feel that what you're saying is spot on. I feel that, who was it, Wordsworth, we murder to dissect, or maybe it's the reverse, but it's that we have to be able to chop things up in small bite-sized pieces and spoon-feed them to folks. Whether it's in academics, whether it's political, whether it's militarily. And I don't know if it's the same way, but we are in a battle, for lack of a better word, about what is reality. Whether it's about who won an election, about whether it's economics, what's the right system for us, whether it's about religion, that we're starting to question that, which I don't have no problem with. But there's some things that were true 5,000 years ago, and they'll be true 5,000 years from now. An illustration is what you put out comes back. Okay, that's just the law. That's universal law. What goes around comes around. You do reap what you sow. That's a law. That's not personal. And people who don't adhere to that law eventually will pay the debt. So I'm thinking that, but on a more positive note, we do need to start questioning. Maybe this is a way for us as a species to start. The pendulum was all the way over here where we believed everything we were told. You didn't question it. If you did, you weren't patriotic, you weren't a Christian, you weren't. And now the pendulum is all the way over here where we don't know what's true. And that you have a truth and I have a truth. And quantum physics would say we both, because it's the way we look at stuff. But that's something else. But the pendulum will swing back, I feel. Will we be here as a species to witness it? I don't know. We have a choice. But what you're seeing is a whole paradigm shift. It's like a baby's being born, and it's messy, and it's painful. And so to question reality, to throw things out, yes, sometimes you throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's all over the world. That basically there's a paradigm that's not working anymore, and there are those who benefit from this paradigm, and they're going to hold on to it for dear life because it works for them. And there are those who are saying that's not where we are anymore. And we need something a little more inclusive, equitable, call it what you will. That's where I see it. Academically, politically, religiously, socially. And it's not, we haven't finished writing the page yet. We may not. We may destroy ourselves first.
Mm. Well, why don't we move to another part of outer space and ask Peter's second question.
Well, now that we're hanging out in Second Temple times, there are numerous examples of possible UFOs in ancient religious writings. What are the examples that are closest to what is now called alien abduction?
Well, one could argue that Paul was abducted. I'm going back now. I'm starting at New Testament, maybe going back, when he talks about, and Paul, tell me if I'm wrong, when he says, I know a man in Christ, whether he was taken up physically, I do not know. Anyway, he's talking about him going up into the second or third heaven, and he said, I can't utter what I saw. That I think Paul was abducted. Definitely, we can look at Ezekiel, Elijah, especially when they're taken up and then they're dropped off here and there. Listen, we don't know where Jesus was during those 40 days and 40 nights. He went off to pray. Where? Up into the mountains. Well, only God knows. No pun intended. I would say that in the West, most of the prophets, Jeremiah, Isaiah, when Isaiah, I'm looking at Isaiah 40 in the Aramaic transition, Aramaic translation, verse 22, it is he who sits upon the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens as a curtain and spreads them out as a tent to dwell in. This sounds like a view from up above. If the inhabitants sit upon the circle of the earth, this is Isaiah saying that. Well, I was taught that we didn't know the earth was round until around Columbus time or whatever. And he's saying that the inhabitants look like grasshoppers. He's definitely up above, I would say, and I would say that our prophets, our biblical prophets, if they weren't abducted, they were at least in the company of non-human intelligences.
Well, certainly Enoch.
For gods. Enoch, yes.
It was he's
scribe for the gods, yes.
Yeah, because then he was not, for God took him.
Yeah. So a lot of our religions in the West, one could argue, now I'm not going to say they were done purposely, I don't know. It seems like these messengers, they didn't have time to explain stuff. They would just say, hey, this is what, thou shalt or thou shalt not, and this is it, and I'm gone. The only real time we have in the book of Acts where Paul, is it Barnabas? Anyway, they're mistaken for some reason for gods, and the people bow down to them. It's in the book of Acts. I think it's 12, Acts chapter 12. And, hey, he tells them, hey, stand up. I'm a man like you are. So that tells me a couple of things. Obviously it's very easy to give your power away, but there must have been star people who could either look very human or could attain that shape, because they looked at him and they just bowed down. Now, I don't know whether his appearance changed or they saw something different, but he did say, hey, get a grip, let's stand up and let's do this.
Now, we of course wanted to get into the Nephilim, but we're kind of coming down to the wire here. But Michael, before we run out of time, please tell us where people can find out more about you, your books.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. My God, time is fun. Well, we have to do it again. Listen, gang, you can go to Amazon, and my books are there, Alien Scriptures. The latest one is Initiation, the Spiritual Transformation of the Experiencer. There's a book called A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness. I have a meditation calendar called God Consciousness, and I have a book called The Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and the Power of Affirmative Prayer. You can go on Amazon. My email is michaeljscarter@gmail. If you write me, I will respond. My website is Michael J.S. Carter. And haven't been on Ancient Aliens for a while, but occasionally you can catch me on some episodes there. In September, I'll be out in Flint, Michigan, speaking at a UFO conference there on this very topic and spirituality.
Yeah. And you'll be seeing a lot more Michael on this show. I'll guarantee that.
Yes. Paul has got, I moved, guys, and so we've been planning this for a long time, and so I'm finally settled in my new home, and Paul and I are just going to kick it around.
Yeah, that's right.
Matt, it's good to see you. I just want to say that I know we got 10 minutes.
Yep.
But it's, oh my God, now you have my contact information.
And I'll make sure you get mine.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, so we're not done yet. I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to do that.
No, I just wanted to get that out before.
Right. Okay. So the Nephilim, or Nephilim, as it's sometimes pronounced, you point out in your book very astutely, Michael, that the Hebrew root of the word is not giants, because the most of the translations, which are awful, will say there were giants in the earth in those days. And you point out correctly that the root of the word Nephilim is people who came from the sky.
Yes.
Not giants.
Yes.
And the fact that they were able to intermarry with human women means the DNA must have been identical almost, or they must have had stunning technology for gene splitting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I concur on all those points. Now, listen, I'm going to jump ahead. Yes, the DNA had to be really the same or similar for them to make these babies. I'm jumping up to the time of Jesus, though, because Jesus had brothers and sisters. And so the church has always wrestled with this. They were cousins or what have you. But, Jesus talks about his father being different. I think his father was an extraterrestrial. I think we could argue that intelligently. But he also had brothers and sisters. And we remember Alma, A-L-M-A in Hebrew, means young girl. Doesn't mean a woman or a young girl whose hymen hasn't been broken through intercourse. Doesn't mean that. Mm-hmm. We have St. Jerome to thank for that translation.
Yes.
Because Jesus could not have been born, from a human individual. But so when he says, "This is my father," he's not joking. That his father, and if one of your parents is a star person and the other one isn't, that makes you not feel fully human. And so that's where I go to Jesus probably being a hybrid. It certainly would make more sense with the miracles and the so-called miracles and things like that. But, as Brother Paul said, in the book of Enoch, these 200 angels come down and they found the daughters of men were fair, meaning they were beautiful, voluptuous, and they went native, as it were, and had kids and families and carried on. So it's interesting.
Yeah. People speculate about alien DNA and things of this kind, and again, it's all speculation.
It's all speculation.
But at this point in time, you'd think everyone alive today would share those genes. Had that occurred.
Yes, I think we do, at least to a degree. But even what you just said, Paul, it's anathema, it's blasphemy. This is why people were getting killed and beheaded and exiled, because the church fathers, using that word intentionally, this wasn't. You can't talk about that because it throws the whole God thing off. It makes it more complicated, at least.
Well, the question, of course, arises, what does this do to our understanding of God? Now, you say in the book that, and I agree with you, very much so, that it does not in any way destroy the idea of God. I mean, my spirituality, such as it is, I really try to foster it, is based pretty much on the still small voice from First Kings.
Yes.
God was not in the earthquake, etc. And you find God in the simple, beautiful, I say again, things. And to me, that's the basis of spirituality. And I'm of course deeply influenced by the Orthodox tradition, which is really quite simple, despite the ceremonial aspects of the liturgy. So that's me. But what does all this do to God in your view, Michael?
What it does for me is that it makes us almost have to grow up. Because the whole thing, when we talked about, you and I agreed with this, Paul, about most of our problems in the world today, I think, and you agree, come from a spiritual malaise, if you will. That may not be a strong enough word, but because we believe we're separate from each other. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that's the sin, and I don't use that word a lot because it's so misconstrued. But it's that you believe that you're different from me, maybe because of my hair or my skin. I believe I'm different from you like that, or you believe I'm different because I'm in a red state or a blue state. All those things don't matter. We come from the same cloth. But this thing of separation, which is an illusion.
That's right.
It keeps us, Einstein's talked about it, greater minds than I, that once we buy into that, so now I'm separate from God. God is way out there. And so I'm not part of that. But that's where the church got it wrong, intentionally or not. And this whole belief in separation has brought us to where we are, where we can now destroy ourselves. I'm separate from you because of race, or who you sleep with, or what you eat. Or I'm definitely separate from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was taught, this thing, go out and, subdue the earth. No, I'm part of it.
Right.
I'm part of all that is. And so that is where the spiritual, we're all one. It's not a platitude. What I do to you, I do to myself.
That's right.
And so this belief in separation will destroy us, whether it's blue state, red state, gay, straight, rich, poor. I'm not trying to oversimplify. There's some structural, institutional stuff that needs to change. Inner stuff, probably, as within, so without. But this belief in separation will most likely, if we don't wake up, it will kill us.
Very true. Matt, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, we've lost the fact that we're all cells in the same body.
Yes.
We've turned ourselves into cancer.
Yeah. And it could be terminal if we don't pull it together.
Now, getting back to your thing about being able to interbreed and things like that, the job I do now is genetic engineering. Okay, so I can definitely tell you that there is ways of introducing genetic material into things. So
when you're on the show on July 24th, bring your T-Rex with you.
Okay.
Life finds a way.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's right. Ben?
I guess in closing, because we only have about a little less than 5 minutes here. Probably about 6 if I'm doing my math, or 4 if I'm doing my math right.
Well,
which I'm not, because I'm changing my mind. It's so easy to get caught up in apologetics, and the problem is, there's an objective reality, and we're all subjectively experiencing it, and we're all seeing different things, and that's just kind of how it goes, because we're all human and nobody's perfect. But I think the thing is, we all have to. It starts small, right? And it starts by patterning ourselves in a way that is good and life-giving, and we proceed to be a pattern for everybody else. And by patterning ourselves in such a way, then by changing ourselves, everything else kind of changes along with it, because we're all part of this whole web of relationships, and it's important to realize that we're all participating in the same story. No one's the main character. We're all side characters. And it's good to realize that we're all participating in the same thing, and that's really what we all want at the end of the day, is to participate in something.
Yeah, well, we're going to take this up again. I can see many shows with Michael coming, and July 24th, Matt will be our guest, without the T-Rex, and right here in Studio Hope, and we'll. Talking about some really fascinating stuff.
Well, I'll do our best Jeff Goldblum impressions, and then we'll call it a day.
Right. My age, I'll do the Hammond impression. Anyway, take us away, Ben, with our announcements.
Yes, and so Exeter UFO Festival is back in session once again, and that returns in September at the historic Exeter, New Hampshire Town Hall over the Labor Day weekend. That's September 3rd and 4th. This great event is sponsored by the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club to benefit local children's charities, along with ourselves. Speakers will include Kathleen Martin, Peter Robbins, Jennifer Stein, Bob Terrio, Mike Stevens, Lynn Nickerson, Valerie LaFaso, Mac Maloney, and 2 new faces, Shauna and Josh.
I believe that's the elegant name La Jeunesse.
La Jeunesse. You see, you never know with French. We plan to do our traditional live broadcast from the event on Sunday with a panel of the speakers. The subject of our talk, time storms, with thanks to the great British researcher Jenny Randalls, who coined the term. This is a very fun event, and you can join us if you wish, and you can visit ExeterUFOFestival.org for more details.
And Matt, very quickly, tell us about you, where people can find out more about you.
I'm one of the personalities on Spooky South Coast, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been working with Tom Reed on Inner Space TV and UFO Man lately. I've been helping him out. I'll be in Roswell on the 1st and 2nd And there's a couple other projects I got coming up, and of course I'll see you guys more than likely up at Exit.
Oh yeah, it's a small world.
Absolutely.
I'll probably be running the AV again.
You always end up doing that, whether it's planned or not. Ben, what's in the fridge for next week?
Well, we have some cool stuff coming up. Some nice cooling things for the summer. June 12th, we'll bring you an open line show to answer all sorts of questions on many different paranormal topics. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, so I guess we're just about, we'll leave the quote for next week. I'm Paul Eno. We're here with Matt Moniz, and...
You probably did have time for the quote. You sold yourself short, Dad. But it's fine. So we'll catch you next time, and I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.